go, everybody. This is another episode of the Mind Body Marathon. So this one is, last week we released the best of, which was statistically some of the highest rating podcasts that we released over our first year. This one, we're going to release 5 different episodes, or kind of splices from 5 different episodes. And this one is exciting for me. So these are some of the more impactful points that I feel like I've made over the course of the year, and with some different guests and different topics. So the first thing I'll delve into basically will be our episode with Arlen Glick, which was a great episode about his injuries and his build-up for the Cocodona 250. And then we'll delve into my personal talk on Faster Without Fail. So basically it's a talk about running form and some of the more important points on running form. So that'll be a fun little bit. So that's the second thing we splice into. Then thirdly is actually my time with Matt Heberling in Valencia, Spain. Basically, we're going to be talking a lot about running form as well in that. So this is kind of form heavy and physiology heavy. And then we delve into our time with Anthony Cammareri, talking about his career and some of the mindset that he had throughout his career. And then we delve into our time with Frank Aleshi about meditation and mindset. So my beautiful wife Simwa was on that episode, and Frank was on there talking about his experiences with meditation and mindset, and that's a wonderful episode. And then we delve into our time with Steve Paris and Jared Bagage, the other doctor, and at the clinic, and we talk a lot about farming practices and glyphosate and some of the issues with farming and organic eating and things like that. So that episode is one of my favorite episodes, even though statistically it didn't get that much traction, and I feel like it should have. And then finally we go into R3, so rim to rim to rim, and talking about our experiences with R3, which was super fun. And then lastly, we for a little bonus, we have our time with Naomi Cherry, so my stepdaughter who is autistic, and quite a bundle of joy, and she was our last episode of 2020, or in the first season. And so we kind of give that 10 minutes that she joined us. And then lastly, at the end, if you're watching on YouTube, you will get a couple minutes worth of some of the best footage when I ran the Grand Canyon in October of 2024. So again, thank you for everybody for listening for the first year and supporting the podcast. And we've had a blast, and we got a great next year coming up. Thank you.
Got you into running? Like, what was your story? What's your backstory with that?
Yeah, I came to the sport of running from a different route than most people would find themselves, especially if they excel or went pro. The thing about running, like, I didn't run in school or, my early days. It was simply just, I was your hobby jogger. Got into it in my late teens or early 20s, not even really sure when. It just was something that I just started doing as a way of just trying to get fit. Like I didn't want to be that guy that got fat and old, because a lot of people just, let exercise go by the wayside.
Yes, they do.
So it grew from that, but it was literally just hobby jogging that turned into this thing where I was like, oh, running is actually a lot easier than it looks. And
especially
then it was, and then, getting into ultra marathons from a curiosity standpoint. You hear about people doing these crazy things, and then it's like, well, and then I would be the one that would think, I don't just wonder what that's like, but I want to know what my body feels like when I do that.
So
my favorite thing to do in life is to hook my boat up to my Jeep and drive to like West Branch or somewhere that there's trail and a lake, and I'll go and spend 3 or 4 hours out on the trail, and then I'll put my boat in the water.
That's phenomenal.
And spend the rest of the day fishing. And it's just a great way to relax after you did a good workout. Like that is my favorite day out of the year, is when that happens.
You got it figured out, man. You got the magic ingredient.
I feel like t-shirts are going to start coming out about that one, like the Good Life t-shirts and all that. That's awesome. Okay, so when did you even discover the concept of an ultra?
I started showing up at a few local races, and quickly, was like, oh, I got to do a marathon or something. And it was through the running community that people started talking about these ultra marathons. And I was, thinking to myself, oh, wow, you mean there's more? Like
Yeah.
there's more than the marathon. And coming to the sport from a curiosity standpoint, and then also from like just good work ethic, I absolutely love training.
Yeah.
I love high volume training. There's nothing I love more than going and just spending, 20 hours a week training. That is so much fun to me. So I don't even know how much I love racing, although I have to have a race to have a reason to justify the training,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. The carrot.
So that definitely caters better to ultra marathoning than it does to shorter racing.
Yeah.
Not that I would even have the talent to do that shorter stuff, but if I did, I definitely, from an enjoyment standpoint, the ultra marathons are so much more.
Well, you like the process, you like the process, and the thing about an ultra is you're not going to bundle those up together. You're going to kind of have a season you're training for, and you end the season on an ultra, and you're kind of beat up, so you can't really do one for a while. So, you just got to get back to training and kind of go into the next cycle.
Yeah, and I think you had talked about college runners, and I meet them all the time. People that when they find out I run, they're like, "Oh, I did too one time," and they'll quit completely because I think so many times when we're driven by performance, and if we have a coach in our life that's always trying to pound the best out of you to make them look good, then
that's a good way of putting it.
It's so many, because like I run with high school coaches and different people that are very involved in the sport. And a lot of times when you talk with them and they keep talking about all their athletes that are really too young to be doing what they're doing, but yet they keep getting injured and everything. And I feel like when I listen to them, sometimes it sounds like the coach knows better. And a lot of times they'll try to rein the kids back. But at the end of the day, the coach wants to look good. They want their kids to do well.
Yeah.
And sometimes I know when I go out and train the way I do, people would probably think it looks reckless. But yet, when it comes to injury, I have actually been a pretty healthy athlete.
One can say.
Well, okay. So what is that? So if somebody was to look at your training, what are some hasty generalizations they can make from that? What's your style of training?
Yeah, I like to have an off season, which I usually just back off the running. And it usually is in the wintertime. All of my injuries have come from winter training, trying to get fit in the spring. So I like to let the natural cycle happen. And then usually throughout the year, I build a bit. So my first race in the spring or early summer is usually I go into it a little lower mileage, and then I become a lot more bomb proof as the year goes on. Usually my fall races are the ones where I show up the fittest for, whether I perform well or not. You know, there's a lot that can happen in an ultra marathon aside from just fitness. But it's
what about volume and workouts?
When it comes to workouts, that gets a bit complicated because you have to look a little bit more of my whole career rather than just my latest and greatest workouts, because they've been pretty bad lately. As far as volume goes, usually I would like to hit at least triple digits before racing. It's been a long time since I've showed up to a start line with lower than triple digits. So not that I would need that, but on the upper end, 130 to 150 a week is probably what I'm typically hitting before a race, but we'll see. Things are probably going to change in the next year.
Now, how does that, the 130 to 150, like basically, 20 miles a day, right? So how do you break it up? It's funny because people were like, "Oh, you did a long one today."
No.
And I'm like, well, I know 20 miles is a long run. But if you do it every day, is it a long run?
It's all relative.
And some people say, it's over 90 minutes is a long run, no matter how often you do it. But Ideally, I would like to get back-to-back long runs once a week. Like usually for me, that would be like a Friday, Saturday. So I usually
Is that like a 50K? Then would you consider like a longer run?
I would say, yeah, probably more like 25 to 50 miles, like that range would be, because it's pretty common to do like 20 milers through the week.
Yeah.
Or else a morning and evening run. I mean, when you just the math, and I always do take one day off. So whatever mileage I'm getting, I'm doing that all in 6 days.
Yeah.
When you crunch the numbers, it ends up being, 20, 25 miles a day. So between, doing 20-ish, 15 to 20 in the morning, and then maybe a run in the evening, and then slightly longer on the weekends.
Building, just a lot of building.
And I'm sure we'll get into later me finding out I had a torn ACL.
Wait, what? You had a torn ACL? Oh, wait, you were talking earlier. You had surgery.
Yeah. But the crazy thing, and we're going to get really off on this, so I better just finish answering the first question on speed work before I go there, because I've had a torn ACL my whole running career. Like,
oh wow, there you go.
I tore it right about the time I got into running. Didn't ever get it checked out. Didn't really know it was torn.
You just like, like my knees just kind
of how do you know that?
I was skiing, hurt it really bad, and then just like limped around for a while.
It's amazing.
And then it would have been one thing if I would have been running at the time a lot. I would have been like, oh shoot, I can't run. Let's go get this checked out and find out what I did. But at the time it was like, big deal. If it bothers me, I'll worry about it then. And I just got really strong and learned to stabilize it without an ACL, which was
huge. And
crazy.
I'm so glad you're saying this, because, I have a butchered ankle with a lot of ligaments that are not intact. And, the surgeons are like, if you can stabilize it with the tendons, go ahead. Like, because we don't want to have to do surgery unless we absolutely have to.
Well, I mean, I ran 30,000 miles on a torn ACL. So
if you can run 30,000 miles on a torn ACL, you can run on an ankle.
Yeah. And so it gradually got better from the time I tore it until about halfway through my running career. And at that point, I couldn't remember which knee was hurt back then. It actually got that good. But so then things kind of started going a little bit backwards, and I dealt with a hip injury back in 2022, early in 2022. And then from that time on, I dealt with compensation issues where my right leg would always tire before my left leg. And the interesting thing is I could do however much volume I wanted, and it wouldn't bother me. But anytime I would do intensity or really steep climbs, my right leg would always wear out. And I think it was because I was, doing all the stabilizing on my right leg instead of my left leg, because of the lack of an ACL in there. And so that went on for several years until I finally started having some instability in my left knee. And that's when, be about a year ago, is when I finally got it checked out, got an MRI, and the surgeon sat there and looked at me, and he's like, okay, I can't explain how you've done what you have.
Sitting there like,
but he's like, MRIs don't lie. And there is nothing connecting.
Dude, like old school radiology. Like, you gotta flip the spine or the knee over. Yeah, that's hilarious.
Well, it makes it kind of makes sense, because when we did that long run at Camp Tuscazor, and you fell a couple times, and you're like, yeah, if I'm not like paying attention fully, that's when things start to go south. And like, this is when this happens. But when you made that post about your ACL, that was the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, no, it's not that you're not paying attention. It's just because you have a torn ACL and that like you're trying to manage through this. And it makes so much sense. Like, it just,
your feedback's just limited. Yeah. Like the ligaments obviously provide mechanical support, passive mechanical support. And what you did was, one, you either had a tight joint capsule, which protected you long-term, which that's genetic, or two, your bony structure orientation was set up so that it wasn't putting undue stress on the ACL chronically. But then eventually, muscles just can't pick up the slack to that level. And then, we start to get symptoms, because the ACL, in addition to other ligaments, to provide proprioceptive feedback to the brain and what your body is doing in space. So that microsecond where that feedback is just not getting quite to the brain, then all of a sudden your instability it's off a smidge. And so that adds up over time.
Yeah, and that's probably one reason why I went a little crazy with the volume.
Yeah. You just kind of innately did that.
Well, and it was because it's like, well, if I can handle an unlimited amount of volume, but I can't do speed work, then I'm going to do something to get fit. And I'll have to say, even if you're doing it slow, if you're running 150 miles a week and then you're racing 100-mile races, like that produces good results. Like you can get really fit doing just only zone 2 running.
That's another quote right there.
Like a good example of that. Then I also tell the story in the book about bone density. And so that's a really interesting concept where a lot of us, if we think of, and I talk about Clayton Murphy and I talk about a guy named Peter Kostelnik. And so Clayton was a bronze medalist in the 16 Olympics in the 800. And Clayton has a very light bird-like frame. I kind of have that same frame. Like you pick up his leg is light. Like his bones are just not very dense. Like they're just lighter. And you need that for that event, right? Because that event is like obviously super high velocity. And if you wrap a bunch of really taut tendons around a lighter bird-like frame, that's how you get an 800-meter runner. Now, Peter's on the exact opposite spectrum. So I treated Peter one day right after I treated Clayton, and they were the same body shapes, and I couldn't believe how heavy Peter's legs were. Now, Peter ran from Alaska to Florida, pushing a baby stroller with all of his supplies. He did it completely unsupported. And so obviously you need stones for bones to be able to do something like that. You need like really dense frame, but he's only run 2:45 in the marathon, which I get that that's fast for some people, but in the world that Peter's in, that's actually not that fast. And he just can't move his limb in space that quick, but he can move it all day long. So he averaged like 70 miles a day when he did that, which is crazy. So Peter, he's not going to train like Clayton. Like he needs to understand that he's got a different body. So you just need to sort of understand this. And that was a little bit of a dig at some coaches in terms of understanding their own athletes, where I think you get this like one size fits all approach. And now we're sort of understanding it really does need to be not generalized, but very specific to what you're having. And if somebody keeps getting injured, you need to really think about some of these mechanics in here, which is why I kind of talk through some of these tests. Actually, in my opinion, the hardest running event to figure out is the 800 because it's the crossover of the two. I mean, you're a true 800 runner, you can get there in both ways. You can get there from 2.4 or you can get there from 15.5. And a true 800 specialist is distinctly different from a 400-meter runner and a 1,500-meter runner. It's weird. And you wouldn't think that. You think, like Hobbs is, like he can do the 1,500 as well. Well, he's a really unique body type. And but most of the time, that's why you don't see a lot of people bounce from the 800. They kind of just stick with the 800. And Shannon's right, because that's a weird event to sort of figure out, because the whole track world is sort of arguing, well, I know these athletes came from the 2 and 4, and so you need to do more sprinting and all this sort of stuff. And then it's like, well, then you hear of cases where people just come from cross, like a Nate Brennan, and then they run super fast and become national champs in the 800, and they did basically just volume and tempo work. Like, how do you understand what's the right way of approaching the 800? It's really an event where you get this like crazy meshing of ideas, and it's very like political now, where people are just sort of arguing what's better. And the case I was making there is that, in that lecture, is that the answer is the body types, right? When you understand hip mechanics and the difference in hip mechanics, then you can figure out, well, a sprinter body type would obviously want to do more 2-4 kind of work. And then a distance runner body type would want to do more of your 5K style work. And then they'll get both to the 800 at two different ways. Does that make sense? So that's really one of those events where I think a lot of people kind of need to sort of flesh out some of these ideas. Yeah, nutrition is interesting because it's like, that's political, obviously. Now it feels like, it used to be you can't talk religion and politics with people, and then now it's like nutrition is kind of in that same category because people get very, beholden to certain things. But I think one of the biggest issues that I see with general nutrition is that, if I'm going to say there's some easy low-hanging fruit that everybody can improve upon, it's one, eliminate processed foods at all costs. So that's the biggest thing. I don't think there's any lack of, media outlets right now that are kind of reporting on this, with the dyes potentially being banned and conversation about pesticides and all that sort of stuff that's potentially coming with this regime. But I think you just have to eliminate processed foods, right? Processed foods started in the Industrial Revolution with the British wanting to keep workers at the factories longer. So they invented biscuits for the workers. And that's why British smell and they have bad teeth. I mean, I'll tell you that. And so it's just the truth. But that's sort of the start of that process. So at all costs, like, and even considering like racing, like in the morning of races, like just try to stick to natural stuff if you can. Then the other thing is try to avoid, try to eat as organic as you can, because that's going to help you avoid pesticides. It's not 100% protecting you, but it will protect you quite a bit. And just be smart about, what kind of carbs you're taking in. If you're taking in carbs, Google prebiotic foods, focus on prebiotic carbs, because those kind of carbs are really good for your gut bacteria because they're harder to break down. They tend to create a more flourishing environment for your healthier gut bacteria versus a simple sugar, which kind of makes its way right through the gut and just stimulates E. coli production and Giardia and all this bad stuff. So prebiotic foods, I would say really lean into those guys. And if you have a lot of gut issues, be smart about not throwing a ton of probiotics at it, which I know almost every physician will say just, throw probiotics at everything. And my argument to that would be you don't plant your grass every year, you kind of just plant it once and it grows. So that's the way probiotics should be within the gut. If you have healthy gut environment, then you shouldn't have to keep taking probiotics. So if you consistently feed prebiotics, which is a different term, then you'll naturally stimulate good, healthy gut bacteria. So that's sort of the hack there. Staying away from processed, staying away from pesticides, and leaning into prebiotic foods. I think that's the lowest hanging fruit right there.
The cool thing, we were having an organic discussion before this, the start of the podcast about running form. And one of the things that I appreciate is, you sound so Silicon Valley, right? You started a biotech company from your bedroom, and then, you have a accounting background, and then you come into run form. And one of the fears from a running purist such as myself is that when you come in, and I hear so many people talking about like angles and very precise movement patterns with running, and anybody that's read my book or anybody that's kind of, talked to me individually about running knows that it's more, I think of running more like dancing. Like it's more like, reflex driven, and it's more about personal movement patterns rather than like personal identification movement patterns rather than very precise movement patterns. And so talk me through a little bit about like what you're learning with that and kind of some of the modifications that you intend to make with running form.
Sure. So I just want to say up front, so I'm pursuing a very intensive technique program out of the running school in London, founded by Mike Antoniadis. He's started this, it's called the Movement and Running School back in the 90s. These help more than 75,000 athletes, different levels, different sports, but in the end days. And so I found this program, this training program that focuses on running technique, and really, of course, in different sports, you have running in rugby, soccer, you have linear running, multi-directional running. So he was really drilling down into the core running technique and how is this being used in the different sports. And when I saw the principles that he was using, I was sold on it immediately, and I knew that I wanted to apply these principles, because what makes Mike's running school stand out is they really drill down into the movement patterns that these athletes, recreational athletes, have. Is they look at the movement patterns and they see how this parlays into the sport that they're doing, and kind of teasing out what are the subconscious inefficient patterns and try to transition those to subconscious efficiency. And so I really like this program. And so these are the methodologies that I'll be applying as well. And in general, so I'm in the middle, a little less than halfway through the program of getting this certification. It's called a Certified Running Technique Specialist. And, we look at the entire body, the head, the arms, the midsection, the lower body, and seeing how are all of these related to their running technique. Yeah. And seeing, for instance, if an athlete is coming off an injury, they almost always have a compensation going on in a different part of the body. And so we want to address the whole body movements to make sure that, okay, yes, this part of the running form can be improved, but what's happening in the contralateral part of the body. And so we're looking at the whole.
What's interesting is, teasing apart a couple topics there. So, I like that you guys were addressing the subconscious, because most people don't even know that they're like, they have like an arm flail, or that their knee drive isn't symmetrical. I mean, that's not something, most of us don't really know how we run, essentially. A lot of times you'll see videos of ourselves and I'm like, I didn't even know I was doing that. And it's because running is based on, reflexes, right? It's based on 2 key reflexes, and it is totally subconscious. It's based in the cerebellum. It doesn't even touch the frontal cortex, which is your higher center of thinking. It's not a learned behavior, in other words. And so when you're making modifications with running, you have to dig into the subconscious. You have to dig into these patterns that we are unaware of. And from a physician standpoint, if somebody gets injured, say like they have an Achilles injury, like myself, they're limping and they're not even totally aware that they're doing it. So obviously if you fix something in the body, then you can automatically modify running form as well. And I used to think early in my career, when I was working with athletes, when I first got into being a physician, I used to think that just going after running form right off the bat was putting the cart before the horse, because there's all these imbalances that people have, and you're better off addressing those early on, just to clear imbalances, and then the form will naturally sift to a better running form. Does that make sense? Yeah. And this is what I was appreciated what you were saying, Matt, earlier about how you guys, a lot of your guys' tests and movement patterns were testing balance and proprioception and agility. Most people wouldn't think of this, but running is a very coordinated movement. It's a very agility-based movement. Yeah. If you're running a marathon and you're not very agile, it'll show up in your running form. Your form will be very mechanical, won't be very fluid. If you see people in the Olympics and they're running and their form is beautiful, guaranteed that that's somebody that can dance well, that's somebody that has great balance, that can move in unique planes. And that's why it translates that way in running. So most people wouldn't think of it like that, and they just want to train harder and harder and just, lift weights and do more things like that, rather than becoming more agility-based and balance-based, which is some of the things I really appreciated about what you were saying.
Yeah.
Is what you're doing, was it kind of like a long-term process for you, like to get to where you're at and where you're like capturing this like level of fitness and consistency, really? Because I mean, we started working with you when you were still wearing pajamas.
Yeah. I think my first appointment with you guys, it was my sophomore year of track. So that must have been 20, I guess that was 2016 spring. And I was a freaking mess. Just everything.
But the thing about you though is that like I bring you up quite often when I'm talking to like other collegiate athletes or high school athletes, and like you could just compete in like you were always coming back from like some sort of injury, a mess, like dysfunction, whatever it is, but you would capture that like period of whatever that period was, whether it was like a month, 3 weeks, it felt like sometimes, or like 6 weeks, and then you would just go out there and just compete. And
I know it was so funny. Like every season would be like, you'd come in a little bit beat up at the beginning, we kind of set you right, and then next thing you know, like a month or two later, we'll see you in the results. Like Jesus, like you got fit quick.
Like I think your senior year was definitely like the eye opener, because you went from like not running at all to like, I'm going to run districts. And what did you guys get in the 4x8?
We were
at state.
We got second, which is I was just talking,
and I was like, what? Like your like 4th time running ever?
I literally, I was running. That was, I think, probably I was running 15 miles a week for like 3 weeks. I just lifted a ton. Like my 400 got really good from lifting, and I think that just totally carried me. Like I don't think I could have ran a good mile at all. But
that makes sense.
But I didn't run for over 90 days.
But like,
that team was amazing. That was a ragtag group of guys. So
it was.
Who was on that team again?
It was leadoff was Justin Long. He ran 201 his junior year.
I love it.
And then, but he would always like break a shin in the winter and come back. Then he ended up running 156. Second leg was John Jesser. He was always good. He ran 154 as a sophomore, but he was 156 on that relay. Jack Barchett ran 158. he's PR'd by 16 seconds that year.
Yeah.
Which he runs for Maryland now. He's a 149 guy.
Yeah,
So
he's solid.
legit. Yeah.
Oh, he's at Maryland now.
Yeah, he was in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And then now he's at Maryland.
He's got a mullet now too. Looks
Yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah, I just ran with him today actually.
Yeah.
Australian mullet.
Yeah, and then it was me on the anchor.
But so what did you split at state?
154. I was just like the 154 guy.
Just a consistent group right there.
Yeah.
That's a great group. But like,
Yeah.
so like after that, you go to Miami,
Mhm.
kind of up and down career.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate. I think I just wasn't strong at all going in because like even the 8 months before that, like it didn't run for 3 months, and then it was running 15 miles a week, and then now I got to run 8Ks. So like it took me a while to break 25. Like I broke 25 once my sophomore year on like a really fast course. And
That's
then
amazing.
my junior year, I was like a 24:30 guy, and then it took until my senior year to.
And that's when you started
Actually,
doing more of
good.
the cross training, where like more of your training was more cross training than it was.
Yeah. Because freshman, sophomore year, I was running 60 to 65, but which doesn't sound like a lot, but coming from
like 15,
yeah, which I did more like in previous years, but
yeah,
like in high school. But I just that's what I was coming off of out of high school.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just too much, and I was just broken down always, and ended up stress reaction on my foot. Then I was out for. It took way too long to heal. It took like 3 months. Tried to run, didn't work.
Yeah.
Had to take another 5-6 weeks off. And then I started the cross training and only running 55 a week. And that just seemed I was just actually able to run consistently for months.
Yeah.
What was your ratio of like time cross training compared to like mileage run? Like, was it pretty?
Yeah,
well, that's changed quite a bit.
Yeah, it's gotten, so I'd say for the first 3 years I started cross training, it was just, I was running more and cross training more every year. So like junior year, it was like 55 a week with like 3 to 4 hours cross training. My senior year, it was 55 miles a week with like 6 hours cross training. And then my 5th year at Ole Miss was like 65 miles a week. And then I was up to like 7-8 hours cross training. So it was a lot of volume, but now it's like I'm running more and cross training less.
Right.
I'm just running.
Yeah, it just took a long time to build up the soft tissue and the bone tolerance to the load, and eventually got there, and I can actually run.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So we were talking about this last time on the show that never aired. So what was your best finish at state and cross?
29th.
29th. And then currently, is there anybody in that era of high school that's faster than you?
From Ohio.
Yeah, exactly. From Ohio.
The one is Lucas Bonds. He runs for BYU.
Yeah.
He's my age. His mile PR is faster than mine. I think he ran 3:55.
So
he's placed pretty like higher than me at NCAA cross country, but he's also year 7. So
yeah, exactly.
Year 7.
So it's not total 1-to-1 comparison, but I was better than him at I think I'd still beat him in 5K right now.
Yeah.
But it's probably pretty close in a mile.
But that's pretty freaking amazing.
Yeah, I've definitely come a long way since then. The 29th was a pretty disappointing day too. So I think I was a little faster than that, like earlier in the year.
Yeah.
But
so for somebody that's not wanting to travel to India to have these experiences and they just want to get better control of their mind and feel a little bit more in control of the day and just have a more positive outlook on things. Where do you suggest people start with that?
That's a great question. We're all in the middle of a dream, and we all have a experience that is so relevant and real to us. To say that someone's got to wake up and do it this way might be very abrupt.
Yeah.
I think that it's a matter of ultimately taking a little bit of accountability for wherever we find ourselves and starting to, instead of thinking like, I've got to change all my thoughts, that could be overwhelming.
Yeah.
Even
and
if
the buy-in's going to be very low on that one.
Pardon me?
The buy-in's going to be low because who can do that?
Yeah, it's difficult because stop thinking is a thought.
Yeah. Well, we roughly have 6,000 thoughts in a day, roughly. And not every thought carries the same weight, obviously, but about 80% of those on average
are yesterday's.
Well, and negative. Which actually, in a weird way, yesterday's are mostly negative because very rarely do we actually, like I'm going through this practice now of just like literally documenting what I consider to be my greatest wins, my greatest achievements. And it's a weird practice, actually. I don't know. I've never actually thought of that because I always am like thinking of things that are like, what didn't
problems that need to be
yeah,
fixed.
what are the problems? What's causing me anxiety? What do I need to focus on? What were my failures? How would I have changed what I did yesterday? What I did last week? What I did, et cetera. And we've talked a lot about this even with regards to business and so yeah, I mean, it's just interesting. It's like 6,000 thoughts. I mean, and 80% of those, 5,000 of those are negative. It's like, that's bad.
Well,
it's a great place to start.
A lot of us are so immersed in our thinking that it's difficult for us to see the thinking.
Yeah.
It'd be like see the fish being aware of the water. Thoughts are things.
Yeah.
And what we think,
we're learning that.
thoughts are things. I'm
pretty sure Dr. Seuss actually, doesn't he have a book that he stated that back in whenever he wrote his book in the 70s,
well,
right?
There's a lot of good insight on that.
Well, if we consider the nature of other things, we have these organs of perception that are aware of these objects of perception. And you practice meditation, you might close your eyes because a lot of the energy in our brain and our body goes to processing what we see, and we can't even process it all.
Yeah.
So much of what we look at goes into our unconscious mind, our subconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times you'll maybe hear, look at this candle, because that focuses the sense of sight.
Yeah.
Or listen to this bell because it focuses the sense of sound. So if you consider the power so this is kind of what I was saying before about just a little bit of philosophy helps us kind of look at our minds and go, oh, that's not a me thing. I don't suck at this.
Yeah.
Right. Because you sit for meditation for a few minutes and you're like, oh my God, this is the worst. This is so hard.
Yeah.
Just so me.
Or, and that happens. We see that in students when we sit for a few minutes quietly in the beginning of a yoga class, very difficult.
Yeah.
It's like the hard part of class. And then you go through a series of difficult movements, which we have an easier time moving through because we're going to conquer it. We're going to do it.
Yeah.
Right. The other one required a different part of our neurology. So we have to build the neurology for those quiet moments so we could continue to progress in our efforts.
Yeah.
So if we think about the nature of perception, we use our five senses to perceive the world. They're pointed out, right? Like they're extroverted.
Yeah.
And they go out, the organs of perception go out and they feel and gather and report through our incredible nervous system. Mm-hmm. And similarly, like our eyes can see the objects of sight, so our mind can see the objects of thought. And if we consider, well, what is the mind? Well, we know so much about the brain. The mind is like the culmination of all the things that we perceive. So if you spend your time perceiving certain things or thinking certain thoughts, your experience inside is going to be full of that kind of those objects.
Yeah.
We consider like the word is the world. And all those words are the world in there. So when we sit and we meditate and we see all of those thoughts coming up, sometimes they're correlated to the experiences that we've had.
Yeah.
Or some of the thoughts that we think, or some of the music that we listen to, or the food that we had, all of the nutritious things that we've ingested, whatever it is, because that's the nature of those organs. They're perceiving and pulling in, perceiving and pulling in. So the nature of thought is so fascinating because we sit and we listen to our thoughts and they're in the sound of our own voice. So it just further pulls us in and in this really concrete way that's who we are until we go to sleep at night. And for a lot of us, we dream or we have no dreams, but we either are disassociated with the body and the mind, or we're disassociated with just the body.
Yeah.
But we prove every night that we go to sleep that we're not just the body.
Right.
Because we go on existing. but we have no awareness of it. So the nature of our meditative states is like a deep sleep, but you're aware.
I think it's, like you said, it's like your words create the world, because of late, especially, it's, like since the age of like internet and quick information and quick news, it's like like we talk about this all the time. Like everybody, it's not that they want the negativity, but that's almost all that is expected. So it's like, even if you are having this moment where and nobody for nobody at all times or any time is everything great, right? So I just had this conversation yesterday, like if you see somebody, whether it be on social media or in real life, and you're like, wow, like they're doing this fun thing or this great positive thing, whatever, it's like, but you have to know that there's also other areas. Like if 2 or 3 or 4 areas seem to be going really their way and positive, there's also other areas, whether it's an internal thing, whether it's an actual, part of life that you just don't see because they're not talking about it or posting about it. There is another area that's a challenge to them. Like nobody at any point, you can mention the person with the most amount of money, with the most perfect body, based on standards, whatever. But there's nobody that ever has 100% of the part of their life going 100% well. But yet it's like expected that you would focus on talking of the negative. Like, we just had this conversation a couple of weeks ago that you come across friends, like even people that are close to you. Like we were talking how like there's maybe 2, 3 people in my life that I would feel comfortable being like, oh my gosh, like things are going really well because blah, 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 blah. This is happening for me. And I could also simultaneously mention 2 or 3 things that are going really poorly, but it's like my energy and my focus is focusing on these things that are going well and trying to push them forward. But most people in my life, I would just be like, it's okay. Life's good. Oh man, like the weather's crappy or this is going wrong. And oh my gosh,
yeah,
my
it's all
kid that.
superficial. You're not actually.
But
yeah.
everybody just like people would rather hear you complain than they would want to hear you be positive.
Yeah, this is a point that she makes often.
Because then it's like, oh, you're just bragging, or well, your life's just perfect. It's like, well, no, like I still have crap going on too. It's just that I'm focusing on these awesome things happening instead.
Why do you think that is?
You probably get that a lot because people probably that you might be around be like a little frustrated that you're so calm and collected. And they're like, well, your life's not stressful. Like you must have a lot of money, or you must be this or that, or you must, somebody's going to come up with a reason why you're in a certain state of mind instead of it being like, no,
I can reach that too.
I've wrestled with these ideas and this is a muscle that I have worked. And, it's not, nothing is like, that's why I just pulled up a quote from Naval Ravikant. It's like that. I love this quote. He says, a calm mind, a fit body, and a house full of love. Like these things cannot be bought. They have to be earned. So you could be, Zuckerberg or, Elon or any of these super wealthy people. It's like everybody still has to work hard to get a calm mind, a fit body, and a house full of love. Like that, not money, previous experiences, like nothing can do that. Like you have to literally earn that. And that's such a fascinating idea. And I think kind of goes in hand with what you were just referring to there.
And so my mom, she's like, we got to have a blueberry patch. And so we got 240 blueberry bushes of different varieties, of course. And no spray. We would put like a peppermint based oil to keep the
okay, so that's amazing. So even back then, why did you guys choose not to spray?
Yeah.
And by spray, what do you mean?
So a repellent for insects, the Japanese beetles, very destructive to the blueberry bush, and they could come by and take away your entire crop within a week, and so you weren't able to pick it, you weren't able to sell it, and to kind of repel those insects, we wanted to do it as organically as possible without putting on a insecticide.
Yeah,
obviously, trying to stay as healthy as we could.
But how did you know that was healthy? You know what I mean? Because that's kind of before this became a little bit more common knowledge.
Yeah.
Which we'll delve into the Monsanto thing and glyphosate and all that. Yeah. But
I mean, in my experience, I think the practices you were doing were handed down for generations.
Right. There you go. Okay,
which is what I was told. I was like, why do you do it this way? It's like, this is the way we've always done it. And I think, you think back, like, if my grandmother can't identify it as food, don't eat it.
Yeah.
You know, and those practices they did back then fed everybody.
And what's really cool about that too is that I'm sure using insecticides and pesticides were probably sold in the fact of you can produce more quicker, faster. But I think logical people realize like, no, this is not
Well, what's
okay.
interesting, if you Google, I did this last night, if you Google organic farming, because that's what we're really talking about, like pesticides in general is, you know, inorganic. And like glyphosate specifically, which is, you know, was made by Monsanto, it was initially patented as an antibiotic.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's initially how it got patented. And I think that's still its main patent, even though it is considered, it's Roundup essentially, but it's an antibiotic.
Well, it works, I think, on the shikimate pathway of a plant.
Exactly. 100%.
And that's how they could get away with it, is because it affects the plant.
Yeah.
So arguably it doesn't affect a human.
Correct.
But
the
big but.
Right. So, and that's tricky because that's exactly accurate.
And it's also not water soluble. So it stays in our environment. If I got that, I think it's not water soluble.
Correct. So it's a forever
chemical.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why it's used as crazy. But when it gets to the body, so let's just delve into that. When it gets into the body, it takes the place of glycine, which is one of the 20 amino acids. And glycine happens to be a very unique bended amino acid that provides a unique bend in a lot of enzymes and and collagen. It's really important for the bend in collagen, which is what makes up fascia and muscle. So glyphosate, which is Roundup, replaces glycine, but it has a little phosphate backbone to it, which then deactivates its ability to be able to hold its integrity in the enzyme and also within the collagen. So the collagen becomes weaker, it becomes more frail, the enzymes become less efficient, and then your body doesn't recognize some of these new metabolites or end products. So it's basically glycine and glyphosate or Roundup have the same receptor in the GI tract, and that's how it can get in.
Okay.
So ultimately, that's its destructive pathway. So yes, it is accurate. It does not specifically mess up the pathway within our bodies because we're not plants, obviously, but it takes the place of glycine. So it doesn't matter if it affects that pathway. It does something else.
It does, and then the fact that our sinus and intestinal wall are one cell thick.
Yeah.
The presence of the glyphosate leads to what is now coined as leaky gut and the various symptoms and syndromes associated with that. So it's very destructive to that lining, which is our body's protection from the external world.
Right. I know I was talking with a girl, a lady who teaches in the Akron public schools, and she said in the kindergarten entry classes over the last couple of years, some schools have 1 in 5 are on the spectrum. And obviously we know allergies have gone through the roof and all that sort of stuff. It's like this is one of the main reasons.
I would agree. I heard a podcast with Dr. Zach Bush several years ago, who was on the forefront of researching glyphosate and its effects. And one of the questions posed to him was, well, if it's so dangerous, we would see this spike in something? He's like, we did. Here it is. When glyphosate was introduced to the chemical industrial agricultural system, within 2 years, those conditions you were speaking of started to spike.
So people are trying to link it directly to like leukemia and bloodborne cancers, which is fine. And I think it's probably related to that. And that seems to be where all of the lawsuits come from with it. But in the end, it's like you saw autism rates go up. You definitely saw intestinal irritability come up, like dysbiosis. Because one, we talked about the glycine and glyphosate, right? We talked about that pathway in the body. So it affects the way you're built. But the secondary thing is, the first thing I said was it's patented as an antibiotic. So you're essentially consuming all this like low grade antibiotic, which is going to wreck your gut bacteria.
And we've also established that it's not water soluble. It's staying in your body.
Yeah. So the point I was going to make is last night I was doing this, I was Googling is organic farming good? And it's like everything that you can't find. It's all the articles now. Like I just screenshotted all this. Like organic farming requires more land to produce the same yield as conventional farming. That's a big conversation. They just keep saying it requires more land. And this is the other thing they say. Additionally, organic farms often need more water due to less efficient irrigation systems. So literally the only negative thing they talk about with organic farming is the increase in land and then the increase in irrigation issues with it.
It's propaganda to
Right.
sow fear.
That's what I'm saying. So like it doesn't even have anything to do with from the health perspective. So a little brass tacks here. So we did roughly by compadres calculations, roughly 45-ish miles. I just keep saying 46 because it sounds more baller.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same. Yeah, so do
So
I.
it's-
GPS error.
To be fair, we did take a couple wrong turns.
All right, we are 40 minutes in, probably a couple miles. We took a wrong turn at Cedar Ridge or something. So, spiritual high, Zach's tying his shoes, doing our first nutrition.
That's why it's a little longer
Yeah.
than what a
And
normal rim to rim attempt is.
So we did it in roughly 15 and a half hours. He did it a little quicker. He took off at the end. He just needed to finish. I was actually stopping a little bit more to take photos and just enjoying the sunset. So I was about 15 minutes behind him. Now we did, so a little bit of details. We did South Kaibab down to Phantom Ranch, which is where the river is. Okay. And then we took the North Kaibab all the way to the north, turned around, North Kaibab back, Phantom Ranch. Then we took Bright Angel. So that's the details of our experience.
Which is
Pretty standard.
pretty standard. And I think probably the way that most people should do it if they're going to attempt it.
It's a little shorter because South Kaibab is
Yeah.
shorter than Bright Angel.
Right.
Yeah, and most importantly, when you're coming back up between 37 and 44 miles, you have additional water stops that exist on the Bright
Yes.
Angel Trail that do not exist
Right.
on South Kaibab.
Which really, really helped. I was asking Adam before we started, and I want to ask you this because I have my opinions on this, but out of the three of us, like, which ones had the high highs and the low lows? Because, and I'll give you an example. Like for myself, when I look back on this, I feel like I had a very balanced experience. Like I don't really feel like
Yeah, but that's you in general. I don't think you physically had a balanced experience. I think you mentally had a balanced experience.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would say almost like your pit was almost the worst up on the North Rim.
Yes, it was. It was. But there was points because I'll tell patients this, like when they ask us about our experience, where I felt like I was talking to myself when I was talking to you in certain points.
Yeah.
Like when we were making our way back to Phantom Ranch and you were so mad because every time we like crest the corner, you'd be like, where is it? Why aren't we there?
So basically what happened was, so that was the genius of this attempt. So we had three of us there and we all came at it from all different walks of life and all different spectrums. And in the end, you don't know when each of your members is going to hit their low spot, and you just sort of have to corral around them and just be there for them because you may be feeling good and they don't feel good. And maybe they didn't think through certain things, or maybe they fell at mile 30 like I fell. So what Zach referenced was when we were coming back on North Kaibab to Phantom Ranch, I fell at roughly mile 30 and spanked my knee on a rock and was basically limping for the rest of the time. And I was really dying for Phantom Ranch because I needed a break to just rest my knee for a minute. And so that was the qualm there.
Yeah, I mean, I had a Garmin InReach Mini 2 on my pack, and when you fell, I remember standing there for maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes with the SOS button out.
Yeah.
Like, all right, we're calling a chopper at this point. Like Leo's not getting up. And this speaks to the toughness of this man right here, because I would have quit. He got up, he starts walking, he's putting weight on it. And I mean, maybe 10 minutes later, we walked for a little bit, and then 10 minutes later, you were jogging again. I still don't know how.
What's amazing though is that we saw the helicopter, not even like
we saw
some lady just hobbling on.
I could have hopped on that helicopter, and I was like, I was so close to going up to that helicopter and asking if they had any ice.
So what
do you say? Get her
Yeah,
on?
let's have Naomi join us.
All right, hang tight. Okay, here we are back with the famous Naomi.
What do you say, Nay?
Hello.
And
Do you see
her,
the camera over there, Nay? You can look at the camera too.
so her outfit right now, she totally picked this. We're going to go to the playground later, so she picked her sunglasses. Nate, what were you telling us earlier? You said you are what?
Autism.
Do you know what that means, Nay?
Hmm?
What does it mean that you have autism? What does that mean? Do you know?
You're being awesome.
You are awesome. I'm glad that you know that. What else does it mean? Do you know?
Hmm?
What happens sometimes with your brain?
I think
A little bit different?
different.
Yeah. What are some things you like to do, Nay?
Do lots of things.
Like what?
Dancing,
Okay.
soccer, basketball. Not being very lonely.
Yeah, you're not very lonely, honey. You have lots of friends.
Yes, but I need someone.
What do you mean?
Like a boyfriend.
Oh. Hey, love on the spectrum. We're going to try to get her on there, I think. This is her big goal right now.
She is an 18-year-old girl, so.
What's one of the new things you started to do, Nay, that you go on Mondays and Tuesdays?
When I do exercise.
Yeah, Nay started doing Buddy Strong with CrossFit Soul. And that's one of the things where the first time she went, she did not want to go. And it was a battle for me, and pushing through and having to kind of put my foot down and working through some behaviors. And I had to be there the whole time for the first session. And ever since that first session, she loves to go. She,
Why do you like it so much?
When I be stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are very strong. And then what else do you do on the weekend? What did you do yesterday?
Where?
Well, you worked, but what else did you do before work?
I rode horses.
You rode a horse?
Yes.
What's the horse's name?
Mariah.
Mariah.
Mariah is. Don't twist that so much. Thank you.
So I'm very proud of myself.
Oh, I'm glad you are proud of yourself. For what?
How I'm awesome.
Yeah. Can you tell people about your Instagram?
How I get when I make lots of Instagrams and saw photos.
So her Instagram is Awesome Naomi, which is AUSOME Naomi. So you want to follow her and get some fun behind the scenes look of her life. She does all her own posts and stories. It's fantastic.
So, Nate, what happens if you eat sugar?
You make your brain crazy.
Does nerds do that too?
Yes.
So what does that mean? What would make your brain go crazy? We don't know what that means.
Having too much sugar.
Yeah.
How does it make you feel?
Crazy. Upset.
Yeah.
You feel upset.
And then do you feel like you're on green or red when that happens?
Red.
So we use the regulation zone colors. So green is good, nice and calm. And then red is when she's worked up and not able to control herself very well. Nate, what's some other things that you want to do? Future Naomi wants to work towards?
A house.
A house. Before a house, what do you want to do?
Go to Orlando.
What else do you keep asking to do?
Go to Japan and work at Target.
Oh, big job. You want to work at Target?
Yes.
To move up in the corporate ladder from Outback to Target?
Yes.
Why Target?
So I could go on the cashier.
Ooh, you want to work as a cashier.
This
I
is
didn't
news
know
to me.
that. Now, where's somewhere else that you want to go that Isaac got to go that you want to do? So, Nay, what is something else you want to try to do soon?
Go to Kent State College.
Nice. And what do you want to do there?
Watch players play basketball.
Ooh.
Oh, you want to go to the basketball game?
And what are some things you have to work on to be able to do that, to go to Kent State?
Do hard work.
Mm-hmm. What else is something Mom keeps telling you have to focus on doing?
Math.
Now that you're 18, what do you have to work on and think about?
Working at Target. Outback.
You have to behave like
an adult.
And what does that mean sometimes?
Behave like adults do.
Which means what sometimes?
Don't get upset.
Yeah, we have to work on not getting upset, right? And staying in control, staying on green.
Yes.
Anything else you want to share, Nay?
That's it.
That's it. Can you look at the camera and say bye to everybody?
Bye-bye, everybody.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us for a great episode of the
Close.
case. And here we go.
Case closed.
The case is closed, and Naomi is out. All right, and again, it's important.
So-
She just dips like that.
And that's how it is. When Naomi's done, she's done.
You cannot mimic 1,000 feet a mile. You just can't mimic it
Especially with
until you
stairs.
do it.
I'm not getting anywhere near that. That's way too. Waka waka doo doo, yeah.
Inches away from obliteration.
But you gotta admit, going down feels so much nicer than going up. What's that? You gotta admit, going down feels so much nicer than going up.
Oh my god. Dude, I worked myself out of that hole.
Yeah. I feel better at this point now than I did coming up this, that's for sure.
That's why I had to take it easy, because I inhaled a bunch of food.
Bib.
And then I let out a massive burp.
There's Manzanita down there.
Yeah.
We'll do a water stop there, replenish.
Yes.
We gotta eat. I gotta get another food in before we get into the box.
I'm ready to put on my ice cold cooling suit that I got off Amazon. I basically waddle like a penguin, but I'll be at 32 degrees in 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a tough spot. Watch out, there's rebar sticking out right there. The log's gone.